So I have been very inspired by all of the TED Talks that have been happening recently and well for the whole year. And what I love the most about it is people getting up here and talking about what is meaningful to them and what's significant, what they're passionate about, what makes them happy. And it's interesting because I see these talks and I think of it through this occupational therapy lens. And I think it's a lens that would be possibly helpful for everyone to see your own life through and what makes you happy through. So that's what I want to share with you today. So this talk is kind of more about you than it is about me, necessarily. So next slide. So first of all, just think about, before we start our talk, what makes you the happiest? If you could just keep it in the back of your mind, like what makes you happy? It's an easy question, kind of, but a very complicated answer. And I could give you some statistics about happiness, like people are no happier when they're younger than when they're older, and men and women report same levels of satisfaction with life. Having more money does not necessarily, except for the very poor, the very poor tend to report lower levels of happiness. But then once you reach a certain level of comfortable living, people tend to report diminishing levels of happiness as they increase in wealth. Just an interesting thought, but that's all. Just think about what makes you happy. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about, next slide, about what occupational therapy is. Because I don't know, it's kind of a vague term if you've never heard of it before, what we do in occupational therapy. And so it's basically driven by the idea that we are what we do. So occupations are actually meaningful activities that we engage in everyday life. So this means different things for different people. And what occupational therapists do is help people live the most meaningful lives possible by helping them engage in the activities and occupations that they find meaningful. So this can change. So the way that we're have a profession is because there's a lot of times people encounter things in their lives that prevent them from engaging in occupations to the fullest. So if somebody has a traumatic accident or an injury, a disease, or they're born with some sort of learning disability or autism or something like that, they might not have full access to what's meaningful or what could be meaningful in their lives. So what we do is help to rehabilitate those people and help them to engage in the things that they find meaningful, which could be as simple as brushing your teeth, texting, working out, or I put some things that I find to be meaningful, like hanging out with your friends, partying. That's an occupation. Running is an occupation for a lot of people. It makes you feel really good. For me, I love to perform, and that's an occupation for me. So I'm going to focus a lot of my talk around the philosophy of Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi, words to live by. It rhymes. Okay. Anyways, can't really tell you how to pronounce it. So the first quote I would like to just introduce some of his philosophy with is, "It does not seem to be true that work necessarily needs to be unpleasant. It may always have to be hard, or at least harder than doing nothing at all. But there is ample evidence that work can be enjoyable, and that indeed it is often the most enjoyable part of life." So part of what we're going to talk about today is what activities and things that you engage in make you the happiest. And so there's some theories behind why certain activities make us feel more engaged and more and get higher levels of return and satisfaction from them. And so this is something I think we can all relate to, because I think the majority of people in this room love it when we're busy. We're all leaders. We like to be involved. And there's something to be said about that. The challenge of what we're involved in definitely motivates us, I think, to some extent. So we'll come back to that later. And then secondly, people who learn to control inner experience will be able to determine the quality of their lives, which is as close as any of us can come to being happy. And this is a quote that I feel, I read it, I didn't even realize that he said that. But I that really resonates with me because for me, happiness is 100% a choice. It's not about what happens to you, it's about your perception and your decision about how to react to what happens to you. So I wanted to throw that in there because it resonated with me. But we can move on and start talking a little bit about flow. So maybe a lot of you have taken some intro to occupational therapy courses. This is a pretty basic concept that influences occupational therapy. So this is the idea that flow is basically the state that we are in when we are the most engaged in an occupation or in an activity. And so these are some, we'll go through them briefly. There's some characteristics of what you might feel like when you're in flow. So as we talk about it a little more, you might realize that you've been in flow today, or you've been in flow before, or maybe it's something you've worked towards but haven't quite achieved it yet. So flow usually involves having clear goals. So this means they're in line with your ability and you know what the activity is meant to produce. It also involves concentrating. You have to be completely focused on the activity. You also will lose the feeling of self-consciousness. So that feeling of self-reflection about what you're doing, that doesn't exist during flow for the most part. You have no conscious awareness of the action while you're doing it. A distorted sense of time. So, you might be really into something like playing the piano or, playing a sport or doing something or writing, and you have no idea how long you've been doing it for, and you realize, oh my God, it's 7 p.m. I missed my meeting or something like that. You don't realize what time is moving around you. And then feedback. You get direct and immediate feedback from the activity itself. So it's not that self-conscious feedback where you're making a judgment about it, but the activity itself gives you direct feedback. Like listening to the piano example. So listening to the song and you know it's right and you just keep going. And then balance between ability level and challenge. This is something we're going to talk about a little bit more with a graph. This is very mathematical. So there's, yes, and that actually creates, sorry, which one's that? Oh yeah. So a balance between ability and the level of challenge. And then a sense of personal control over the situation or activity. So you feel like you're in control of what you're doing and you are in control of it. And then also it's intrinsically rewarding. So you're not doing it to be rewarded by, you're not running the race to get the gold medal. You're running the race to run the race. Or there's no external motivation during this. And then also a lack of awareness of bodily needs. You may not realize you have had to pee for an hour, or that you missed a meal and you're really hungry. You're just really, really into it. And then action awareness merging. That means you have you're just completely absorbed into the activity and narrow the focus of awareness down to the activity itself. Okay, next one. So this is a graph that shows the optimal band of engagement is right in here. So this is where flow occurs. It's when skill level is in line with the challenge level. So it's not very rewarding to do something that's way too easy for you. So if the challenge level is down here and your skill level is down there, you're going to be bored. So doing something like, I don't know, if you're not into coloring, if you're doing a really easy connect the dot thing, you're probably not going to be very motivated. Whereas if you are in a really advanced art class and you're trying to copy one of Crystal's nudes, and you're just oh my God, I don't even know how to draw a hand, then you're probably going to feel a lot of anxiety because the challenge level is so high and your skill level is just so low. But so basically, your optimal band of engagement is when you can get to a high level of skill and a high level of challenge in any given activity. And it's hard to get the just right challenge, as we love to say in OT, but that's what you're aiming for. So we have a couple more slides about this that is based on a study that Csikszentmihalyi did about asking people what feelings they felt when they were in various bands of engagement. So not necessarily in the, so you remember this is high skill, high challenge. So when there was low skill, low challenge, people felt apathy. And then moving them to a little bit of higher skill, they felt boredom. And then at some point, when the skill was high enough and there was just so little challenge that it was ridiculous, they felt some sort of relaxation. So it's probably like laying outside in the sun. That's like, it doesn't take any challenge at all. And then as the challenge rose slightly, but it was very manageable, and the skill level was high, they felt control. So that's, you know, knowing that you can do it. So it's, you know, tempered with a little bit of boredom, but you can still feel that control. And then flow is the optimal band of engagement there. Arousal is when challenge is a little bit higher than your skill level. So that's when you're, it's like how I feel right now, because I don't really know exactly what I'm going to say next. Woo! And then anxiety is when you're, yeah, like I mentioned, painting the nude, when you're, you know, you get it. Okay, so let's look at the next slide, which is typical home life activities that people reported in these various bands of engagement. So as you can see down in our relaxation corner at the bottom right is reading and eating. And then moving to the left, clockwise, chores are boring for most people, or they're just, you know, not challenging enough. TV watching is associated with apathy, low skill, low challenge, and then little hassles that require some challenge but no skill are next. High challenge and low skill, which produces some anxiety, is work and studying. Learning is usually high challenge and medium skill, so it produces that level of arousal, you hope, unless you're in a really easy class, and then you probably tend to get more bored in those classes. And then your favorite activity, which obviously he's, you know, Canadian or something, while it's kind of hard to get into a state of flow when you're doing something with other people, because that kind of brings you out of it a little bit, because you aren't just doing it by yourself and getting that, you know, that feedback we talked about that's like so immediate, like it really was on other people. But anyways, it's like an occupation for me that I really enjoy. And then, I forget what pictures they're putting. I put pictures, but you can go. Oh yeah, so Laura went on this hike too. I went to, I realized this hike was like really good because it was like high challenge for me who does not hike ever. And it was like hiking to this waterfall, Escondido Falls, and it's really beautiful. But yeah, so the first part of the hike is really, really easy. The second part of the hike, you have to like climb up rocks and like go with this rope, but then it was like just so rewarding, and it was like, I felt like it was a perfect balance between my skill and the challenge, so I thought it was a good example of flow. And then finally, I love performing, and as I think probably all of you know because I'm annoying about it, I'm in an improv group, and so, well, I didn't have a picture of me like actually doing improv when I usually am not very attractive because I'm making funny faces. Anyways, but I love performing, and I feel like I can achieve a state of flow, and that's actually, you know, the whole point of improv is like being in the moment and reacting in the moment. So I feel like that's a great activity, or it's the example I usually use when I think about flow, because you're only going to do good improv if you're really responding in the moment, getting that like immediate feedback. And then that's all. That's what I'm just going to